They didn't call him sir, not even Mr. Griggs. To most of them, he was just Walter, the cranky old man in the rusted wheelchair who showed up at every town meeting and sat in the back row like a stubborn fixture nobody could move. The kind folks at the care center said he was harmless, just lonely, probably confused, spinning up old war stories to keep himself company. One nurse, fresh out of school and full of hurry, muttered once as she drew the blinds on his room, "You weren't a real soldier. Just another old man with a pile of stories nobody asked for." Walter didn't argue, didn't even flinch. He just turned his eyes toward the shelf above the radiator, where a small, dust-covered shadow box sat untouched, sealed since 1972. And when he didn't wake up the next morning, someone finally opened it. Inside were medals no one in the building had ever seen. A silver star blackened by time, a folded, yellowed letter bearing the name of a Marine general, and 4 words that changed everything. "He carried us home. If you agree that respect shouldn't arrive late, or only after someone's gone, then like and subscribe, because this story matters more than ever." It began a week before Walter Griggs passed, inside the Municipal Hall of Pine Bluff, Tennessee, a small town better known for its antique shops and lemonade stands than any sort of drama. That Tuesday night's council meeting was packed tighter than usual. Something about rezoning Veterans Memorial Park into a parking structure for a new shopping complex. No one noticed when Walter rolled in from the back, his wheels squeaking quietly over the faded linoleum. The room was loud, impatient, restless, the way small towns get when budget lines and real estate collide. Councilwoman Devers clicked her pen against her clipboard as she argued the park was barely used anymore. "It's not like the dead need benches," someone snorted. Laughter scattered through the audience, thin and careless. Walter waited until the public comments opened, then rolled slowly forward, each push deliberate, his fingers trembling but precise. "I'd like to speak," he said, his voice rough from age and disuse. The microphone perched awkwardly on its stand. A few groans. One man muttered, "Here we go again." The mayor sighed but nodded. 2 minutes, Mr. Griggs." Walter adjusted the brakes on his chair and pulled a weathered page from his lap. "That park," he began, eyes never leaving the paper, "is the only ground in this town where every single name on a plaque once called me lieutenant. That got a few eyes up. I trained with those boys. I bled with 2 of them in Danone. I carried another out of a firefight on my shoulders after his leg got blown clean off." He looked up, "And I came home to a town that doesn't even know their names anymore." Snickering, Councilman Vickers leaned back, arms crossed. "Come on, Walter, no one's trying to disrespect anyone. It's just land." "It's not just land," Walter said quietly, then reached inside his coat and pulled out a folded black and white photo. "This was taken the day before deployment. That's me in the middle. That's Tommy Hill. He didn't come back. And that's James McBride. He lived 2 weeks after this photo. The memorial is all that's left of them." "And that's very touching," Councilwoman Devers interrupted. "But the reality is we have a budget crisis and priorities. I watched them die." Walter said louder, suddenly strong. "And I swore I'd remember them. So yeah, I'm old. I'm tired. I'm not what I was. But I remember. And I thought this town did too." The room was dead quiet. For about 3 seconds. Then came the chuckle. A cruel one, sharp and loud from the front row, where a teenage boy in a Letterman jacket leaned into his buddy and whispered, "Bet he doesn't even know what year it is." Laughter rippled. Some council members smiled uncomfortably. The mayor looked away. Walter didn't. He just let the silence fall again, deep and awkward, before he turned to leave. No anger, no speech, just a quiet pivot of his chair and a slow roll toward the door. That's when it happened. The back doors creaked open. A woman stepped in, tall, precise, her marine blues immaculate and her posture rigid as iron. Colonel Hannah Reyes. The room shifted immediately, as if gravity had changed. She didn't sit. She didn't speak. She walked straight to the front of the hall and faced the council. "Pardon me," she said calmly, "but I'd like to finish that man's statement." Councilman Vickers blinked. "Who are Colonel Reyes?" "U.S. Marine Corps. I served under Lieutenant Walter Griggs. 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. I owe him my life." The room was now frozen. "And before you laugh again," she added, looking directly at the Letterman boy who now stared at his feet, "understand this. The ground you just mocked holds more history, more blood, and more honor than your whole committee ever will." Walter stopped his chair mid-roll. His lips didn't move, but something in his eyes did. The kind of shift that happens when a man no longer has to fight for his name, because someone else finally did. You could feel it, the shift. That thick, electric silence you only ever hear right before something breaks. Colonel Reyes didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her words cut like steel through the shallow air of that small-town chamber, through every grin, every smirk, every chair creaking under the weight of shame. "Lieutenant Griggs carried my squad through an ambush outside Tam, Kentucky. 2 down, 1 unconscious, radio's gone. He stitched a kid's artery shut with a safety pin and a bootlace. Then he led us 3 miles through enemy territory with 1 good leg and no backup. So if you're going to call him just an old man, say it again now, while I'm standing here." Not a sound. Even the mayor sat back in his chair like he'd forgotten how to breathe. I looked around that room, from my wheelchair, wondering how many people still saw the veteran, or if they only now realized what they almost erased. The boy in the Letterman jacket, the one who had mocked me minutes earlier, shrank behind his dad's shoulder. I wasn't angry at him. He didn't know any better. But the council should have. They were the ones who sent letters every November pretending to remember. They handed out flags while forgetting the names on the stone just across from the library. I didn't come that night to fight. I came to plead for memory. But Reyes turned my plea into a reckoning. She pulled a document from her coat, held it high, and read it aloud. A Department of Defense citation, issued in 1974, naming me for acts of valor under fire, recommending me for commendation I never accepted. He turned it down, she said, because he didn't think surviving was something to celebrate. Because the men he lost didn't come home to ceremonies or plaques. They came home in silence. Someone in the audience gasped. Another stood. Then a third. It spread, slow, uncertain, but real. People began rising from their chairs, not clapping, not cheering, just standing, straight-backed, heads bowed. Respect. Finally, the mayor stumbled to his feet and cleared his throat like he was about to retake control. But Colonel Reyes wasn't finished. She stepped to the center of the floor, directly between me and the council, and asked them one question. "Would you bulldoze Arlington if it made room for a strip mall?" Councilwoman Devers looked like she might cry. Councilman Vickers had no answer at all. "Then why?" Reyes said, her voice still calm but sharp enough to draw blood. "Do you think you can pave over our dead just because they were buried quietly?" The mayor mumbled something about reviewing the proposal, but it was too late for politics now. The town had seen behind the curtain. I saw a young mother in the front row wipe a tear from her cheek as she clutched her daughter's hand. I saw an EMT who once wheeled me into the ER step forward and say, "That memorial is why I joined." One by one, folks started speaking, not to debate, but to confess. A baker recalled her brother's name on the plaque. A high school janitor, eyes glassy, said he used to run drills with me in Non. Stories long buried started surfacing, and just like that, memory came roaring back through those dusty halls. Reyes helped me roll forward again, but this time I wasn't alone. When I reached the podium again, nobody laughed. Nobody scoffed. I didn't even need to speak. She did that for me. Walter Griggs never asked for a parade. He just didn't want us to forget who we'd buried under that field. And if this town has any spine left, it won't just leave that park alone. It'll rename it. She turned toward the mayor. "You still have your gavel. Use it." He looked around the room, at the townsfolk who were now his real jury, and quietly tapped it. "Motion to withdraw zoning proposal," he muttered. "All in favor." The room thundered with ayes. Not one dissent. The memorial was safe. And so was something else. My name. My record. My silence. They finally understood why I sat through every meeting, even when they didn't want me there. Not to complain, not to scold, but to bear witness. To remind them what that ground meant. Reyes leaned down and whispered, "You good now, Lieutenant?" I just nodded, holding the moment like a long-held breath. It wasn't victory I felt. It was weight, finally lifted after decades of silence. And as I rolled back to the edge of the hall, someone shouted 2 words that shook me more than any bullet ever did. Attention on deck. The room, almost by instinct, snapped to its feet again. This time not for Reyes. For me. And I realized that I hadn't come to ask for respect. I came to prove it was still possible. I didn't expect the town to change after that night. But it did. in ways that didn't make headlines, in ways that mattered more. The next morning, I rolled past the diner where they used to forget my coffee order and saw the same waitress step outside, salute me quietly, then hand me a cup already paid for. The mayor himself visited the care home later that week, not with reporters, but with the maintenance crew, carrying 2 new signs under his arm: Griggs Memorial Field, one for the entrance to the park, and one for the street that ran alongside it, replacing the old Pine Circle sign that nobody remembered anyway. I didn't say much, just watched them bolt it in. But when he looked back at me, nervous, searching, all I said was, "Don't let the kids forget why it's there." Colonel Reyes returned to base a few days later, but not before leaving something behind: a sealed envelope with my name on it and her personal citation included inside. Taped to the envelope was a handwritten note: "For the man you never left behind, Simplify." That sat on my nightstand untouched, not because I didn't want to open it, but because I already knew what it meant. That evening, something strange happened at the town meeting. People filled the seats early, and not just for the council drama. A middle school teacher brought his class to watch. A high school student stood up during open comment to say he'd enlisted because my granddad fought with Mr. Griggs. They never let me roll to the back row again. They kept a seat for me near the front, marked with a small plaque and a folded flag. One night, they asked me to speak, formally this time, not with time limits or timers, but with the full floor. I didn't have notes. I didn't bring a speech. I just told them about Tommy Hill, who never got to come home. About James McBride, who wrote poems in the margins of his field journal. About the time we dug a trench by hand for 16 hours straight to keep a village dry during monsoon season. And the time Reyes froze in the dark, and I whispered the Lord's Prayer until she found her nerve again. I told them that leadership isn't loud. It's watching when no one else is looking, and remembering when it would be easier to forget. No one clapped at the end. They just stood again, silent, like the way we honor the dead overseas, because that kind of reverence doesn't need noise, only presence. The care home framed the medals they found in my shadow box, hung them in the rec room. A kid asked me once if I was a hero. I said no. "Then why'd they give you medals?" he asked. I looked at the glass and said, "Because I came home." A lot of people didn't. He nodded like he understood, and maybe he did. That was enough. A year passed. A bench was placed beneath the flagpole at the park, with my name on it. I'd sit there some mornings, listening to birds and the distant clang of Little League batting practice, knowing every name on that memorial stone had finally been spoken aloud again. Then one spring morning, the VA van came to get me for a physical. I didn't come back. Quiet heart failure, they said. No pain. Just sleep. The nurse found me with a photo in my hand and a half-finished thank you letter to Reyes on my table. But here's the part they'll remember, because they still talk about it every year on that same date. Just after my service, with the town gathered at the park, Colonel Reyes came back, unannounced. She walked straight up to the podium, saluted my folded flag, and spoke only one sentence. He didn't need a podium to be heard. She stepped aside, and the whole town stood as taps played under a sunset that looked like it had waited just for that moment. The letter I never mailed to Reyes was found and read aloud later by the mayor. In it, I wrote, "You gave me back my name when I thought it would die buried in concrete. Thank you for proving silence still holds power. Thank you for reminding them. That bench still sits beneath the flagpole. Every year, new recruits visit from the nearby base, and they're told my story, not through a plaque, not in some stiff lecture, but by standing in the quiet, reading the names, and listening. Some say legacies are carved in marble. I say they live in how long people remember your silence. That's the real tribute. And if you ever walk past that bench and wonder who Walter Griggs was, just stop and listen. If it's quiet enough, you'll hear the sound of a town learning what it means to stand up.